Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Speak nerd and enter.
I don't even know what that means.
Now we can edit that out.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I'm Sean, Drew, of course, and Mark, our fearless leader this week. Yeah, we started that off-camera conversation talking about, by the way, Drew, so that you know, we started that conversation that we can't have now on Robert Rodriguez. Remember Mark was talking about Sin City? Remember he was saying how good that was, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying there is a thing you see in so much of what Frank Miller does that is his like MO. The first two stories they had in Sin City, and remember we saw that together. We went and saw that up at the Egyptian up in
Arundel Mills.
Yeah. Mark, you were there too, right?
I
saw that
remember.
as like a group.
It's quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah. One of the few times. Well, no, I better not say that. I was going to say something about Russ, and I better not say that. But I remember when we went and saw that and I was watching that movie, I was thinking, yeah, the first two sections of that were really cool. You know, very much like the comics with Marv and all that, and then that Yellow Bastard and all that stuff. But then it goes into this Frank Millerism area where it's all about the, this noir, like romanticization of, the hookers and all that stuff and the Clive Owen story and everything. That was just a little Miller-esque is the only way I can describe it. And I was telling Mark that was the reason I never liked Elektra. I never dug Elektra as a character. And I could never put my finger on it until I, found out what his inspiration was for her, which was some wrestler, wrestler character that he really liked in real life. So he modeled her on that, that personage.
I believe it was Andre the Giant.
Andre, yeah. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a Frank Miller thing, And then, of course, 300 and all the stuff we were talking about with that.
Yes, this was a very not safe for work conversation that we had before pressing record. But it might have been the best thing we would have ever put down. But, man, this pure bleeps.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe some channels,
Yeah, there are parts of the internet that are totally into that kind of thing.
That get into that sort of thing, but we're not one of them. This is a clean show. We don't work blue.
We're a family-friendly, clean show over here. So
that's right. All that stuff is taken care of.
But it's interesting you say that. Like I watched some YouTube videos. Like while at work, I'm doing other stuff. I'll throw on a video, and I watched like a reaction of these two people who are watching Sin City. So I didn't watch the movie this week, but I watched two people watch the movie, and so you got to see a bunch of scenes and them talk about it and whatnot. So that is fresh in my mind, as a matter of fact, and I'd forgotten some of the cinematography was really, really well. It was a true adaptation.
Yeah.
From the comic page to film. They went out of their way to not just make a comic book based movie, but to say, let's take these frames or these panels from the comic and translate them into the screen. And that was, I will give all the credit in the world to Robert Rodriguez for his faithful adaptation there.
I will say this. I will go so far as to say it even opened up a whole new avenue of movie making, even more so than his Hollywood foray into RoboCop, where he wrote, as you may recall, RoboCop. What was it? 2, 3?
I think
3. Yes,
we're talking about
jetpack. That's right,
Frank Miller.
Jetpack.
Yeah.
Yep. So I will say
he and Simonson worked.
And then
together.
he directed a movie. I forget what it was, but right.
So Walt Simonson did the art, and Frank Miller wrote a comic book for that. And the one thing I will say about Sin City, I think when Sin City started out, it was like amazing as far as comics go, because no one was really doing anything quite like that, at least in American comics. It's like no one was really sort of.
Which means no one was doing it.
Storytelling.
Because nobody else matters.
Okay. Because it was like America is still dominated by superheroes, and I mean at the time actually Dark Horse Comics was experimenting with a lot of cool stuff and all that, and they had been for quite some time. But I mean, when he initially started with Sin City, that was a lot of fun, and his art style sort of evolved. I mean, he was going down that path with Dark Knight, and even before then, with Ronin that he did for DC, and also right before then with his Wolverine limited series, which Wolverine became more like Clint Eastwood in Frank Miller's limited series, and I think, and of course, his Daredevil, they were all heading down that getting the art getting darker and more like negative, positive, working in negative space, doing the art. But yeah, I think the problem is I think it sort of was like the story started getting. Yeah, I don't know. I found that the stories were not as compelling
No,
as
they weren't.
you as it went on. I think he just kind of ran out of ideas and pushed everything. It started getting into
It
in
reminds
his
me of.
weird picadillos. It started going down a path that was like it was
It
no
was
longer
almost
sort
like
of
he
an
was.
initial genre of noir. It was becoming this weird,
It was
weird.
almost like he was writing fan fiction of his own work. It
Yeah,
was.
I mean,
It got into this weird. That's what I mean by the Millerisms. Was it got into this weird area where it was almost like he figured, well, they accepted this stuff. Let me try to put this in there and see if they
yeah,
like this.
to read. I think as the first stuff. First stuff was so much fun,
Yeah,
and Marv. I
Marv
actually
was awesome.
Yeah.
Marv
I
was
actually got to
great.
speak with him about it very briefly. Um, it was one of those weird things where I actually had some friends that were going to this Diamond Comics like meeting
Mhm.
about actually talking of. They were there for games, of course, for Games Workshop, and my buddies were like, well, I knew Frank Miller was going to be there speaking because they also did the comic stuff at the same time they did the games. It was a big Diamond meeting with distributors. So of course my buddies were like, if you want to meet Frank Miller, we'll give you our badge and you can go in and meet him. And I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. So I waited out there, I had a bag full of books and everything, waiting to go in and meet Frank Miller and getting him signed, Sin City, and because it had just come out. And so anyhow, I was sitting there waiting to go in, and I was like sort of on the side of the building of the Baltimore Convention Center, and here comes Frank Miller, steps out to smoke a cigarette, and I was like,
I
"Oh
could
my
see that.
god!" Yeah, so I went over to him, and I was very polite because the guy was obviously on a break, and I just started introduced myself and started talking to him, and he was really really a nice person. I mean, he could have been like, okay, yeah, that's great. Kind of want to just get a break here and go back in. But he was really cool. He like talked to me. I didn't pester him to sign any books because at that point I had already gotten a chance to like speak with him, and I felt like that's all I really wanted to do. And I had asked him, I'm like, oh wow, Marv was so great, and Sin City was so cool. Do you have any other plans in the future, with Dark Horse? And he was like, oh yeah, there's more Sin City stuff. I've got a whole mess of stories coming out, and
Do you regret
uh,
not telling him to hold off and not do that?
no, because these stories were the good ones that
Oh,
still were
okay. I thought you meant like later on
like
stuff. I got
later
you.
on.
Okay.
I mean, I wish I could have been like, okay, but only do the ones that are really good. Don't get into the weird prostitute
Yeah,
thing.
anything that
I
looks
mean,
like an S&M sort of black and white Mike Mignola thing, just stay
well, some
away from
people
that.
really
You
like
say
those
what you
stories.
want. I'm sure it sold a lot of comics, though.
Well, I'm sure it
Yeah, it
did.
did. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really enjoy those. I enjoyed the other stuff, the first stuff. Really like the first, what, 5 books or something, which, it's still a lot of stuff that
Mhm.
was really cool. But I think it definitely did start to go down a road. And to his
Was
credit, was like, with Marv, he kills Marv, I mean, he did bring him back to tell some stories earlier, which is
Yeah.
cool. But he could have really milked that thing if he wanted to. I mean, he could
Well,
have
that was
taken
one of the things
taken
that
that
was really
story and
cool about it was him, like you said, killing Marv. It was kind of a here's the arc boom done, really cool thing. That yellow bastard, same thing, just definitive. Here's a little vignette of Sin City, a little story there. That was really cool. Like you, I don't mind having a prequel thing every now and again and that sort of thing. But yeah, when it started to veer off, it just, you know. But was Mike Mignola a contemporary of his, or was Mike Mignola influenced by him?
no, he was a contemporary. I mean, he was working for
Okay,
Marvel. I mean, he started out, excuse me, with
I didn't
Marvel.
think
I
he
mean,
was that old.
he did Alpha Flight,
Yeah.
starting with Jim Lee, which is really what's really incredible. But anyhow, he did Alpha Flight and all, and then he went over to DC and did some really cool stuff with like Cosmic Odyssey and uh,
Well, how cool could it
one of
be if it was at DC?
my other favorites, of course. Now we're getting off in the Mignola, and one of my other favorites, of course, is the Fafford and the Grey Mouser, which is absolutely amazing that he did for Epic for Marvel. That series is just spectacular. I mean, the color is great too because it's a lot of flat earth tones on top of his simple line work and dark black blacks and I mean just spectacular. But he and Frank Miller and Arthur Adams and um,
Oh yeah, Arthur
oh,
Adams. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
I love
and,
Yeah.
Arthur Adams.
and
Like
what's
he
his
did
name
that New
from
Mutants annual that
Russ wanted
I have
to
a
marry
framed
Arthur
cover of that one.
Adams.
Yeah, I have a framed
they
cover of that one because I
they,
just love
they
that
actually
issue so much.
they actually and John Byrne they actually started a group together at Dark Horse, and it was pretty cool. I mean, also Jeff Darrow and Jeff Darrow did Big Guy and Little Boy, I think, or something like that. That was awesome. I mean, his like really big, huge books with amazing. He's the guy that does really detailed art that's spectacular. A lot of like sort of Japanese influence as far as like what he puts into his art and everything. And then of course, uh, you know, John Byrne. You all know he actually did worked with Mignola doing the first Hellboy. He actually wrote it, and because Mignola he didn't feel comfortable writing yet, and so it's kind of crazy that to think that John Byrne actually wrote that first issue, and it appeared in like a Dark Horse Presents book, which just featured all their various stories and different art teams and storytelling teams and then of course I can't believe I can't the artist for the Watchmen. Why am I drawing a blank? It's a
Oh, you
page.
mean yeah? Now you've taken it out of my head. Um,
It's like totally, but yeah, he actually did art as well with those guys. They formed this little group, and they went on and did like a few different books. And Frank Miller did writing with him, and it was sort of like a futuristic book. For the life of me, I can't, like I said, I can't remember exactly what that. It was basically this black lady who was a soldier, and they were like the burger wars and everything. Because the future was like run by burger companies and crazy crap, and she actually was like this soldier peacekeeper type individual
Mhm.
that was pretty cool. But they did a lot of this like Monkey Man and O'Brien. That was Art Adams' book that he did, and of course John Byrne had like the Next Men, and it was a lot of fun. Those books were great, and those guys kind of really they were a huge blip on the radar for Dark Horse. I mean, what a you couldn't ask for a more talented group of guys, and that's where all that stuff, Sin City and everything, just started
that
coming
was
out. At
that was kind of a mini golden age in my mind for or resurgent age, I guess, for comics. Remember, you had small groups every now and again who would go off and create their own thing, and you'd have this real creative wave for a little bit, and then suddenly it dies off and goes away, and But for a while there, yeah, you had some stuff going on like that in comics for a while, where it was kind of a big deal. You had those big deal releases and upcoming this and that, and so is making this consortium over here, and oh my God, we got to get that one, and that kind of thing. The Blue Beetle days, Mark.
Yeah, that was our local comic book store
Yeah.
in the town we grew up in called the Blue
Yeah.
Beetle. So, and kind of speaking of that, not the Blue Beetle specifically, but I just saw on HBO Plus, Max, Extra, whatever they're calling that channel nowadays. I guess they're doing DMZ as
Yeah.
a live series or whatever. So, like, I
Now,
read the comic, and so, but I hadn't really heard anything about it until I saw the preview for the show that's coming up like pretty soon, and I was like, oh, okay. I have high hopes.
did you see it?
Is it out? Can you watch
Yeah.
it now? Oh, I have not seen it.
Helena
I have
watched
not
it
seen it.
yesterday. Helena
Did
watched
she?
the
Okay.
whole thing yesterday.
And what is it? It's
Now, when you say the whole thing, you mean like episode 1, or is it like a limited series, or what are we
I
talking
don't
about?
know. I don't know because I didn't know much about the comic or anything, so I don't
Okay.
know. I can tell you where it started. I can tell you where it ended. I can give you my thoughts on it, but I'd rather not ruin that.
Yeah, let's
for you.
hold off. Give me a week to look at it or whatever.
Is
I did
this
read the
another
comic.
Batman situation?
I bought the
where-
whole. No, I saw Batman. That was 3 hours. I'm never gonna get back.
so. What are you guys talking? I don't know what you're referring to.
Are we talking about DMZ?
Yeah. What
The comic? Are you familiar with the comic? I'm asking Drew.
It's
That's
about
dumb
a
question.
second.
Oh, barely.
It's a
Oh.
second American Civil War kind of
Oh,
thing,
okay.
and
Yeah, like
They-
New York City is the
yeah.
DMZ.
Manhattan is
Okay,
kind of. It's kind of like what? It's kind of like in the Dark Knight Rises when they cut off Gotham from the rest of the world, kind of thing. They're
Oh,
doing
right.
that with Manhattan.
Yeah, so there's like, fighting outside the city of different factions or whatever, but the city itself is like kind of on its own, and as they say, hilarity ensues.
Yeah.
Well, that
The guy who plays the guy who was he on 21 Jump Street? The guy who played the fellow in Doctor Strange at the very end, who was crippled and got better, and then Mordo shows up and takes his
Right.
his,
Yeah. No, he was
his
the
power
bad
away.
guy in Serenity, right? In the movie?
No, not Mordo. I'm talking about the guy he took the power from. Remember?
Yeah. Who was playing basketball?
Right, correct.
Yes.
Yeah, he was on like 21 Jump Street or something. One of those shows back then.
Yeah.
He was on Modern Family and stuff. I can't remember the guy's name.
If
But
it-
anyway,
yeah.
he played on that show as one of the major characters, as one of the major antagonists. Yeah. I
Okay,
like
so
him as I
We'll
like
put that
him
on
as
the
an
watch
actor.
list and report back next week.
So you saw Batman?
I did see Batman.
What'd you think?
I
Knowing what I said, which it
overall
was
I
not
enjoyed
on
the
it-
whole thing. Like it was fine, but at 3 hours long, when you find yourself nodding off an hour and 45 minutes into the movie,
Yeah.
pacing was a little bit of an issue. And again, I like a languid pace. I like that especially with like new
You don't have
series
to
and
tell me.
shows. Tell me about it. that they can take their time and tell the story, but it felt like, okay, Batman shows up at a crime scene and there's all these cops standing around, and there was like 10 minutes of Batman walking up there and looking down and going, and then he walks over to another place and goes, and then he walks over here and goes, and I was like, okay, we really could have cut that down. This felt like some lazy editing, but the story was good. I enjoyed it. I especially like Zoe Kravitz's Batwoman. I thought she made an excellent Batwoman. I didn't mind
Catwoman.
Yeah, Catwoman. I did not mind him as Robert Pattinson as Batman at all. Like I'm
I
fine
thought
with
he
it.
was I thought he was a good Batman.
Mhm.
For Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, she's fine as an actress. I loved her in Fury Road,
Mhm.
but I didn't dig the Catwoman character in this. She's supposed to be threatening, and never did I feel like she was threatening. She looked like she was 12. And like I said, if there was a stiff wind, she'd blow over or something, Yeah. And
No, she could be very threatening as long as you have a very, very complicit stuntman that she's working with.
yeah. And Robert Pattinson, I did like the fact. Did you get the feeling, because this is I think what he was going for, that Batman was not like the superhero. He was more like this broken guy who just shows up in a bat suit and everybody looks at him like, you're a weirdo. You know, you're walking around in a bat suit. You
Right. Well,
realize that.
he's like a vigilante. He's Bernie Getz on
Right,
steroids
right.
or something. You know what I
Understood,
mean?
right.
Where
And
where
that's
like they're like, shouldn't the cops be doing this?
and
Right?
that was
Like that's
right.
how
And
society
that was
would
kind
look
of
at
the
him.
thing. That was the feeling I got from
Mhm.
it, was that he was kind of this weird, not quite there socially kind
Right.
of
It was supposed to
person.
be early in his bat career,
Yeah.
right? You know, like the time when he had to jump off the big tall building and he's like, whoa, you know, this is
Yeah.
really high up, and he has to get the what is it, the wingsuit, you know, to working or whatever. Like I thought that touch showed that this is not a veteran Batman.
Yeah.
Like Christian Bale's character was. He was, you know, he'd been doing it for a minute and had his his stuff together, and his support team, you know, knew everything what was going on, and this felt
And
like an earlier version.
And like I said, I dug that part of Batman. I dug that. But I didn't. The Gotham City that they had came across kind of like they were trying to do a grittier Tim Burton kind of thing.
Mhm.
It was a little goofy, and like that scene when they come outside of the club and every cop in the city is standing there, you know, to arrest what's his face, and you know, all that. Did you see what I meant with the car chase as well? It made no sense, you know.
Right. It felt like, oh, we have to use the Batmobile. Here's a way
Yeah,
to
I
do it.
was
Like I
like,
get
well,
it.
why
I
did he
get it.
run back
And
to
I
the
can overlook
Batmobile?
little things like that. Like I understand what you're saying. Like I said,
But
it
then
was a
15 people
a
died
good
on the
movie,
street.
but it does not have the rewatchability of which is the one that had Heath Ledger as the Joker.
That was the Dark Knight.
Dark
Dark
Knight.
Knight.
Like Dark Knight, I think is probably my favorite Batman movie.
Yeah.
Because you have an amazing villain, you have an amazing Batman. You know, there's the other host of characters that are in it, but you know that one just felt like I'd go watch that again right now. I'm
Right.
not sure I'd be like, hey, let me watch something while I'm messing around on the computer. I don't know if I'd put on the Batman.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
the action
surprising,
scenes weren't
but
cool enough, and you know they were cool, but it wasn't like everybody likes to see that opening scene where the Joker orchestrates this heist and all the guys kill each other, and so he ends up getting away all by himself with the money, right? Like that, you're like, oh, that was really well done and well filmed. And he puts a smoke grenade in the guy's mouth, and that's kind of a funny payoff, and like that was good. And then there's just so many like scenes you can point to where you're like, yeah, I'd watch that again just because it was really well filmed, or it was funny, or I love that dialogue. I didn't walk out of this movie, The Batman, with, oh, you know what, this scene, oh, I'd love to just see that scene again.
Yeah.
So you're
That's
saying you
yeah.
like better than Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze? That's
Well,
now the one that you would.
To
Before
be
with
fair,
the
we
Nicholas
haven't had
Ronnie
another
one,
Mr. Freeze on screen, so he
That's
is
true.
clearly the best Mr. Freeze.
He is. He is. And I will say this. I will
Yeah,
go so
go.
far as to say this, that Mr. Freeze, I think, was probably a better villain than the Riddler in this. I know there are people who are going to hate that, but you know.
Oh, and see, that's another thing that you bring up. Like, I liked the Riddler in this because we go from the campy 1960s show where it's basically a bodysuit with question marks all over it. It looks like that guy's talking about the government giving away free money. You know,
Yeah.
like that Riddler is the one we all kind of grew up with. And then we have Jim
Carrey.
Jim Carrey, who is basically a updated version of that. And so we haven't seen a gritty, realistic Joker, or Riddler, right? And I thought they did a really good job of making this guy like a nutsy, dangerous serial killer.
He was
like
too
you're afraid of this guy.
He was too stupid for me. It was just.
Let me finish. But then at the end,
stupid.
Spoilers. But then at the end, right? I'm like, oh, okay, the city's having trouble, and there's being a flood, and there's the mayor just got elected 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Brand new mayor at Madison Square Garden or Gotham Square Garden or whatever they call it. And 30 bad guys dressed exactly like the Joker show up with long guns,
Riddler.
get into the ceiling
Riddler.
right above them, and nobody spotted them. Like, what is the security in this place? Like, that really begged a lot of disbelief. I was like, you're walking through New York City / Gotham with long guns. Like, that's not easy to pull off in like, try doing that today and see how long you last. Try sneaking into a building where the mayor is and see how well that works. So there was no explanation of, oh, we've got this one secret thing, and a guy that works there is working for us, and he unlocked the door. There was no plausible setup at all. And literally the mayor's like, calm down, calm down. It looks up and sees, yeah, like if the
There
mayor
was
is
no time in that
responsible for
3 hour
spotting the
movie.
bad guys, you've already lost.
Yeah. And the whole ending part, it just progressively required, like you said, disbelief required so much more that the balance just became ridiculous for me. I could put aside certain things and like, okay, you want to do a kind of a Seven-esque kind of thing and all
Right.
that. But if you're setting him up to be this, this really brilliant criminal who's doing all this stuff and got such minute detail you have to pay attention to discover the answer to this and that, and Batman can't even figure out certain parts and all this, and all this stuff that's building this guy up, and then suddenly, like you said, the plan he comes up with is that at the end we're going to have them come out there, guys you met on the internet that you've never done anything with, and your whole plot is going to revolve around the messages, right? Well, a rifle is good. What
Your plan
caliber? What
to get them.
gauge?
Yeah. And
It's
you
like,
got
oh my
guys showing
God.
up with, double barrel shotguns and bolt action rifles and a couple of like AR-15s. So they were all over the board on that. And let's be honest, I think some Molotov cocktails probably would have done way more damage than any of those
Yeah.
individual, although there was a flood coming, so maybe
And
not.
what the
And
hell was
again,
up with
during a
that?
flood, everyone stays on the ground floor.
Yeah. What the hell was that, man? The whole thing. And then the mayor gets shot
Yeah.
and goes back out like nothing's happened to do another, hey, let's calm down scene.
Yeah.
And with the rifle that they were saying in the messaging, by the way, that those are good for damage. What caliber? Well, apparently they went with BB or
22
Nerf.
short.
'Cause that was,
With wet powder.
yeah, exactly. Because she went out there with that gaping chest wound, and like nothing happened. Given the hey, let's
To
come
be
together
fair,
like a city.
she was
thing.
probably wearing a Kevlar vest under her dress or something, right? If you're the newly elected mayor of Gotham City, it's
Yeah.
a very dangerous city. That's plausible.
Look.
But again, no mention of it in the script. No,
Yeah.
nothing. You know what I'm
And
saying?
let's
Like,
not forget, this is not Star Wars. The military does not go around dressed in evening wear for all their functions with, bulletproof vests and all. It doesn't happen like that. This is the real Gotham world. Okay.
Yeah. There were just enough things to kind of take me out and not give me an excuse to suspend my disbelief.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
then
mean?
the
Like,
length.
like
And
that's
the
the
length,
one
like you
with
said.
Joker, like, allowed me to, like, I get it. That, like, it would, that original heist in the very beginning where the school bus backs in and kills the last guy and he's like, yay. Like, that would never work.
No, it
but it
wouldn't.
was fun. It was
Yeah.
a lot of fun, and I was willing to suspend disbelief because it was so well filmed, right? Whereas the payoff of this plan kind of wasn't. You know what I
it
mean?
wasn't.
Like,
It wasn't at all. And I
but
didn't.
cinematography was good, costumes were good,
See,
characters
I
were
thought
good.
that
I'm
was,
on
yeah.
board for the next one, so I don't want this to be it's all negative all the time
Yeah.
because I'm really not. You know what I mean? I'm kind of nitpicking. Did I have a good time? Yes. Do I wish it was a 2-hour movie? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did like Robert Pattinson.
Yes, agreed. But I like
but
Ben Affleck too. Everybody's
the
giving him a hard
thing,
time.
no, Ben Affleck was okay, I guess. It was just, but the thing that really made The Dark Knight for me, like you said, was the villain. Batman's all well and good. All superheroes are all well and good, but if you don't have a good villain, you don't have anything. And the thing I loved about the Joker, and even in the comics, is that he's just an anarchist. He is just so antisocial. He hates the fact that you are so hypocritical that you're going to pretend that you're living by these rules that mean something. And everything that goes with your society means nothing to him. And that's what was so cool about him. This guy, he was upset because, some people skimmed off the top for, what they were supposed to be doing for an adoption.
For an orphanage or
Yeah, an
whatever.
orphanage, yeah. And it just didn't.
Yeah, that whole again, I don't want to get all bogged down in the details. Like, I liked the setup. I thought this was a serviceable setup for the next movie or two that they're planning. I think they're planning probably a trilogy or something like that. So I'm on board. You succeeded in getting me to watch the next one. Like, it was entirely serviceable. I'm down for the next one, but with some nitpicks on, like, this could have been done better.
Yeah, and maybe
Um,
that's why I'm so frustrated with it, is because I see what it could have been.
right,
It
right.
got me like halfway there, and then it didn't give me the rest. And I was like, "Oh man, come on! You're missing your chance." So that's why I was saying I gave it probably like a C plus,
Yeah,
maybe
C
something like
plus.
that.
Yeah, C plus. You know, and
You
again,
know?
if we want to break it down into like effects, acting, blah blah blah, some places are going to score a little bit higher, right? It was,
Yeah.
areas it was good, and others you're just like, what? Come on.
And I
So
want you to know, Drew, that's a big deal for Mark and I to agree on that, because usually we don't agree on stuff like that. Transformers, he actually enjoyed that very much when we
loved
went
it.
there, and I
It's my top
hated
three.
it.
Kidding, it's not my top three, but it was a good. It was exactly
See,
what I expected it to be.
see,
Got
see
some
what I
Michael
mean?
Bayhem. Come on, let's do it.
Michael Bay.
Yeah,
And
explosions and stuff.
Well, the one
Yeah,
thing you did get
giant
right, there was
robots.
more than meets the eye with that
It
movie.
was more than meets the eye. It was so good. Oh my
uh,
gosh.
Oh, by the
couldn't
way, that's
believe that,
Dave
man.
Gibbons was that
I
artist.
hated
Dave
that movie.
Gibbons.
Oh.
Dave
Oh,
Gibbons did
First
the
10
art.
minutes of that movie, it should have stopped right after that. As soon as they got done blowing up the military base with really cool robot in the beginning,
yeah,
should have
yeah.
stopped. I don't want to see half an
You
hour of
go ahead
some dude driving a
and
tow truck. What's that?
uh,
Uh,
I don't even think
and
it's worth discussing Transformers.
Okay,
no,
yeah,
it's
we're gonna
not.
stop
It's
with
not. But
Transformers
that was
right
my
now.
point.
We'll
Is
do a
that for
special episode on the transfer
Michael Bay
Transformers
on everything
That'd
Michael
franchise,
be
Bay?
one
on
on
Michael
vacation.
Bay's impressive body of work,
You guys work that out. I'll be on
starting with
vacation.
Armageddon and working our way through.
Or Megadon. That's right.
But you know what I want to talk about today that we haven't, like we've mentioned it a couple times. I want to get into
Yes.
some of the role playing games that we were
Yes.
talking about, right? So I am currently playing 5th edition D&D, 2 different games of 5th edition. I've been playing all kinds of, D&D editions from the red basic box all the way up through the current edition, and lots of people play D&D. But Sean and I were talking the other day about like some of those lesser known games that we played over the years, and some of the settings that just kind of really opened up the creativity and whatnot. And so I think
And that's
go
the
ahead.
key. That's the key right there, what you just said. Because I was thinking about this yesterday and today about, what are we going to talk about with that? And I wonder how should we do it as what's my favorite and what's each of your favorite RPG ever,
No, I don't think
or
it is a
nostalgic?
favorite. They all
Well,
have their place. You know what I
well, they
mean?
do, but this is why it's my favorite. Is that
Which one is your favorite?
which one gives you the greatest creativity, the greatest amount of leeway for doing what you want creatively, and just exploring not just the game itself, but also the group you have, and yeah, it's just very freeing. And for me, the one that's always done that, number one, has always been Boot Hill.
Really?
See, I
Yeah.
would say D&D, but after D&D, then the one that I've had the most fun, that's quick and easy, and then you can rely on archetypes and have a good time is Boot Hill. Boot Hill is
See,
amazing. It is a
see, for
Now,
me,
I love Boot Hill.
so
So
much.
Boot Hill 3rd edition is collectively one of our favorite role-playing games. A little one-shot put out by TSR. It didn't have a ton of support behind it. And again, I played every edition of Boot Hill. There was like a box set that had a couple of percentile dice in it, or for 1st edition. But the 3rd edition just was, I forget who wrote it. We'd have to look it up. But they did an excellent job of the rules. But I never felt that one. So it was a very rules light. You're making cowboys in the West. There wasn't there were some skills, but there wasn't like character classes. There wasn't
nope.
like a whole lot of that. So, but again, when you're doing a Western, it was always like, we're bounty hunters, we're outlaws, we're lawmen. So I felt a little constrained from
No,
a
but you
creativity
could.
standpoint, because you're like, oh, you're playing in the West, and you're going to be like one of these typical archetypes from a spaghetti
Now,
Western,
now,
and go have fun. It was amazing, but it was nowhere near the kind of like unbridled creativity that something like Riffs would give you.
but you're thinking about creativity differently. Creativity for me isn't just the setting. Okay. That's why I said creativity being the freedom to explore not just the setting, but actually your interaction with the rest of the group. Because that's really what an RPG is. If I want to explore a setting, I don't need an RPG. I can do that, by just doing fan art or fan fiction or any of that. This one, the thing I liked about it best was that, like you said, it gave you the bare necessities that you needed to get going, and then you were off doing whatever you wanted.
Right.
And we had, remember, I had the rabbi
Yep.
who
Wild
rode
Moisha.
who rode an alligator, and you had,
There it is.
yep, Boot Hill, and old Glue. Remember Glue?
Yep. Yeah, the elevators,
Drew's
the
pony.
alligator's name was Elvis, and the horse was
Yep.
named Glue.
And remember, you had the missionary guy, and just so many characters
That's
that
right.
we've
He was
had.
the Mormon scout who was fond of the scattergun.
That's right. And Russell's Stave
Pipe.
Yep. And just so many good sessions with that were amazing. Drew, one of my favorite times ever playing an RPG ever was when we were playing Boot Hill, and I think it was our first time playing Boot Hill together, me and you, and we went and robbed that bank, and
Pepe.
yeah, and you had
Testicle as my horse.
Testicle, that's right, and there was the old lady there. I won't get into it, but there was the old lady there. I don't know if you remember that, but that was one of the most enjoyable times I've had playing an RPG was in that game, because it allowed the freedom to do that stuff. And it took no more than 10 minutes to
5
roll your
minutes to make a
character up?
character. If you've played a role playing game before, like you're familiar with how they work and the concepts behind them, you could be up and running. In fact, one of my favorite things is I made a character who did not serve. I think he was when we were robbing that bank, right? Kelly was the DM. Your brother was the DM, and I made a character named Jim Happy Burns. He was based on Jim Burns out of the Simpsons.
Yeah.
Right. And Kelly didn't like that I named him Jim Happy Burns. And he didn't make it across the street. He comes right up on his horse, took a couple shots, dead. Like he died. Or even I was like, well, time to make another character. You know what I mean? So I never even played this guy, but it was still a fond memory of him being this red-shirted NPC who basically showed up for the bank robbery and didn't make it home.
So many
that's a
great
great
characters,
game,
man.
I just like the quickness of the game, and I mean, you just go in there and make a silly character, or I guess you could make a more prolonged campaign if you wanted, obviously, but I mean, it's so much fun to get everybody together and just do a quick game of 4 to 8 hours of just
one shot. It's great for a one shot. It's great for let's get together and play 2, 3, 4 sessions. Not like a D&D campaign can last for years, right? Yeah. If you're doing it, and that's fun. That's one of the things I love about that. Is not a knock on it, but sometimes you don't have years. You guys are all in town for the week, or we get together and what do we want to play? Let's spend 3 hours all making up 5th level D&D characters, or we can play something fast and quick. Of which Boot Hill is an excellent one. And again, the spaghetti western, all the tropes and the themes, they're so, as a DM, if you're running it, right, you pick a movie. You're like, okay, we're going to do, a version of this movie or that movie or whatever. Like there's so much,
or
source material.
Or if you have some really good players, we are, you don't even need that. The DM just needs to be, or GM just needs to be essentially referee.
Yeah.
And then you just go out and do your thing, man. I mean,
that's right.
The thing that was beautiful about it, and again, I want to emphasize this, it's not just the setting.
Right.
It's the way that they had it set up for being able to get into the game.
Yeah.
It was fast. It was free. I mean,
it's deadly. Like I say, in D&D, dying in Dungeons and Dragons is hard. You know what I mean? Especially in the later editions. You know what I mean? Like it's almost impossible to, I get all my hit points back after a long rest or a short rest and whatever. There's everyone's got magic spells that heal, and it's ridiculous. But in Boot Hill, think about it, in the Wild West, people running around with 6-shooters and shotguns and whatnot. Like it was a deadly time.
It was deadly.
But you can
and the game is deadly.
Bleeding out.
You could, but that was the beauty of it. The most, and I was going to bring this up, Mark. The most important
Give me some water.
The most important stat wasn't strength. It wasn't, any of it. The most important stat was luck.
Luck, yeah.
That
and
was
your
it.
maximum
You wanted to have a good
on
luck.
a 1 through 20 system luck was 10. The most you could have is a 50% chance.
Yeah.
And when you'd have
that
to make a
was
luck check,
beautiful.
our players, we'd all circle like buzzards, like literally making the buzzard noises when everybody had to roll their luck check. Russell
Yeah.
kicked that one off. It was hilarious. So.
He did.
Pretty
That
cool.
was great. But that's why I
forget-
like
being
Boot Hill.
Don't forget being able to teach your horse one trick,
Yes.
which is
right.
great.
You got to roll intelligence for your horse. Your horse could know a number of tricks depending on how smart they were.
That's right.
And just those little things that were so cool, man.
Yeah.
And if you
when
had
Abraham Lincoln will come in handy.
that's right.
Your horse's skill of being able to imitate Abraham Lincoln. And it actually worked.
It did. Oh, that was great.
A bunch of bad guys. Score.
Yeah, we may have done some slapstick, some silliness in our Boot Hill games, but
we
it was
did a
hilarious.
lot. But that was the
It was so
point.
much fun. Yeah.
That was the point, because the setting was so freeing, or not the setting, excuse me, the rules were so freeing. You wanted to do it serious, you could do it serious. You wanted to do it silly, you could do it silly, or anything in between. It was really freeing that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many of the other games, like D&D, like
Star
the-
Wars.
Star Wars was a big one, and the one for 40K that we were playing.
Yeah, Dark Heresy.
So book heavy, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know they're doing it
And
because that's
They
how
gotta
make
sell
the money.
books, right?
And
Yeah,
it
that was the thing
feels
Gary
that way.
Gygax said back in the day. He was like, all you really need is the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
Okay, throw the Monster Manual in there. Like, after you have those 3 books, you're done. Like, you don't need anything. And he was like, that's the secret. You don't need, the rest of it is your imagination. And these earlier games that we're talking about, Boot Hill's a great one, Paranoia is another one. There's a couple of these
that was
one-shot books. Was Savage Worlds is just kind of the setting, but you could put it anywhere. They're like, here's the rule book, and it's not huge. It's not 500 pages of whatever. It's enough of a framework to let you play in whatever sandbox you want to.
Yeah.
And you're kind of done. That's why I kind of lean to, Star Frontiers is another one. It's very, there's not 5,000 pages of material for any of these games available. It's basically a rule book, and maybe there's a couple extra things you might want, and you're done. But
and
Boot Hill is
the simplicity of the rules. I mean, like we're obviously fans of GURPS. That's great, but the rules in that are pretty crazy. It's just like Champions, the superhero game Champions, is a cool game. You can make any hero you want using those rules. But some of those rules, man, are brutal. I mean, some of the math that you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
so
you remember some of the Traveler New Era books? You could be calculating the speed of light.
But now when you look at something like Villains and Vigilantes, which is a superhero game, that's not so hard to wrap your head around. And that's a quick and easy, fun game. I'll tell you another superhero game that was actually surprisingly a lot of fun was the DC Comics superhero game. You could make a lot of characters in that, and that was easy. The Marvel game, I wouldn't even call that a role-playing game. That was a terrible game. TSR put that in.
Like I played it a little
awful.
bit.
That was absolutely awful. But the DC game, was spectacular. So I would actually take Marvel characters and do them in the DC rules.
Well, see, and I got to put Savage Worlds in there. So Savage Worlds isn't necessarily a setting; it's more of a rule framework. And they have a powers companion. So if you have the rule book and you have the powers companion, you can do any superhero you want. And then they have like a sci-fi and a fantasy companion. So you can take the Savage Worlds rules and play whatever. Right. And so I've always liked, it's a rules light system as opposed to like D&D, which has a lot of rules. So it's, you're going to shoot some kind of a beam. What kind of beam is it? And it does a certain amount of damage. And then you just kind of dress it with whatever flavor you would want for your superhero. Is it a power beam? Is it a flame beam? Flame on versus Iron Man's repulsor beams. In game terms, they both do the same thing. Basically, you're just deciding how powerful they are.
Yeah, I definitely think that Champions is the go-to superhero game.
Yeah,
but I mean, it is it's still a little. I mean, they've had multiple editions, but it still is a little heavy on the rules side, but at least it's not like a bajillion books, I mean, they do manage to get everything pretty much in a book or so, you have everything.
See, that's what drove me nuts about so many of the games, man. Like with that 40K one. How many friggin'
Yeah,
books
it
did
was
I have to have open? What are you doing? Okay, all right, that's over here. Okay, what page was that
Right, the
on?
big pile of books in the middle of the
And it just
table.
takes you out of everything, you
Yeah,
know? And I hate that. And I know they got to make money. I know they got to, I get it. But it ruins the
and
experience.
they were all hardback books. It wasn't
Yeah,
like these were paperback books that are a little bit cheaper. They were all hardback. Like Rifts had a lot of books,
yeah,
but they were all perfect bound
yeah.
paperback. A
They
little bit
were.
more reasonable back in the day.
And you know, Rifts, I'll give them this. Rifts was the game I think that best crossed genres in one setting. So if you wanted to do the babysitter, like we did that one game,
Yeah, the
the
13-year-old
right,
babysitters
right,
run
and
into the
that was for the
supernatural kind of thing. Yeah, that was
monsters,
fun.
and whatever game that was. But yeah, we all played the 13-year-old babysitters, or if you wanted to, in the same setting, you could play mech driving, whatever Russell's guy was, or your guy, the Akagi Fukuyama.
Yeah,
Um,
the teleporter.
Right, or any of those characters that you wanted to play, you could have them all in the same setting. That was cool.
Yeah,
But it was definitely a rules heavy
a lot of
is a
rules, very
rules
kitchen
heavy.
sink, a lot of books.
Yeah,
But
and
the
a
books
lot of
were really
math,
good. Like
like
there
you
were a
were
lot of
talking about, Drew.
settings.
yeah. The math.
You have
Well,
how
you get to
many
roll
how
a
many
lot of
points?
dice.
Okay, we're putting this many into
You
here.
get to
That
roll a
brings
lot
us
of
up this
dice.
much, and I gotta,
How much damage?
uh, I gotta roll to speak English, but I'm from America. I'm
Mike
from
spake
England. Why do I have to,
English.
yeah, I don't, yeah. So
What
there's a
about
lot
Call
of
of
that.
Cthulhu? Call of Cthulhu is a great game.
I haven't
I've
played that. I've
I've got
never
a
really done the Cthulhu thing with the
I
Well,
have,
insanity
and
points
they're
and all
again,
that.
it's you don't last long. You really don't last long, but it's fun. You mostly end up insane. Uh, but if you do live, you're usually have a
yeah, you
few
gain
hairs
insanity
right.
points, right?
Right, right.
Yes,
In that one.
yes.
So let
That's
me
a
ask you this. Okay, so for ease of play, for freedom of play, would you agree? I know, well, I think, Drew, would you agree that Boot Hill would be number one for ease and freedom of play?
first edition D&D. It's
Now I'd
easy.
go with Savage Worlds for ease and use of play. Like Savage Worlds is designed to be easy.
I
Okay,
think
so
I
you
think,
think it's
but I mean, I think Boot
freer
Hill.
than the Boot
I
Hill
do
setting?
like in the way Savage Worlds works. Like, let's say use D&D terms, right? And so your strength goes
Okay,
from a D4 up to a D12. Forget
yeah,
D20s. So the equivalent of having an 1800 strength is you have a D12 strength, and so that's what you roll when you're doing strength related things. So your attribute is the die type, and that's what you roll. You're like, oh, my shooting is a D10, or my sword fighting is a D10 or D6 or what, you know what I'm saying? And so it's
hmm
just, you look at your character sheet and you're like, that die is what I roll, and then you add some bonuses or minuses depending on the situation, and you're off to the races.
Okay, so yours is Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
Okay, I got Boot Hill, and what was yours, Drew?
I think well, I guess second edition D&D, or I mean
Second
no,
edition D&D.
first edition
You
D&D. It's
down with the
like
FACO?
yeah, it's totally it's not hard to wrap your head around. I mean, you can sit down and roll up a character. It can take you 15 minutes, and then you can die horribly, which is what's great about that edition.
So
Unlike
you're
this
talking
edition,
about advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the
right?
first
Advanced,
edition, right?
sorry,
Yep.
yeah, not basic.
I
Advanced
got you.
Dungeons and Dragons, not like today's fifth edition where you can. I want to live forever, and you will.
So
But Boot Hill
for
is right up there for sure
Boot
with
Hill
Scavenger.
definitely.
Like,
Well, it's the
like I
same
say,
company.
I could sit down with a 10-year-old and be like, okay, here's how this works. But like I say,
Yeah.
if you've played a role playing game, if you understand the concepts and you're not coming in blind, I think both Boot Hill and Savage Worlds are easy to pick up.
I gotta say, I really feel strongly that Wizards of the Coast really needs to take a look at Boot Hill. They really do. They really need to look at those rules and just try. I mean, how much would it be to put out one book and just see, let it fly and see where it goes? And right now they've got all this power behind D&D. I mean, it wouldn't. It's just such a simple risk. I mean, they could even do a Kickstarter.
Right, but
if they
but
wanted to do
they're
that.
probably looking at like how many books could we put out? Oh, probably just one or two. It's not worth our time.
But I mean, they could probably put out more books. Actually, you could probably like go really into it. You could put out the basic book, and
Right,
just
the
see
rule
how
book.
it does, and see if people get into it. Because I know like some people are like westerns. I don't want to do westerns. But as soon as they frickin' play this game, they'll be like, "Oh my god, this was so much fun!"
It
They'll
is,
have
man.
fun and they'll really get into it.
And
And
you know what's funny, Drew? You mentioned that the setting and everything. I know, like you said, some people be like, "Oh, westerns. I don't want to do that. It's gonna be boring. It's gonna be like some old John Wayne movie or something." Right? When you start playing that game, how quickly people start
yeah,
putting on western accents.
oh yeah,
That's
and
the
they
best
start they
part. What are
start
you
to
talking
think
Yeah,
about
about?
start thinking about their guy and everything.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I mean,
they
it's
do.
very Red
Yeah,
Dead Redemption,
that's right.
really.
We've
I
been
mean,
It
snookered.
is.
if you
And you know
like
what? That's
Red
a
Dead
great
Redemption,
point, Drew.
then you're gonna
Yeah.
That is a
love this.
great point. That's a
I mean,
great point. I mean, if the westerns were so boring, Red Dead would not have been
right?
the event that it was
Hmm.
with the first one and the second one. And the fact that you can get in there and it's a simple enough game. You're essentially just, here's a lever action. Here's, what do they call it? The cow pistol or whatever the hell
Yeah, like they didn't get
their
all
Colt
bogged down
is.
and like this is a Colt 1868 Navy with
Right.
an open top strap, and no,
Yeah.
it was single action revolver, and it was
And you
lever
know
action
what the
rifle, and
thing
it
is
was
about Boot
long
Hill?
shotgun, sawed off shotgun.
The
Yeah.
best thing about Boot Hill versus Red Dead Redemption is when you get together with your friends to play a game and explore an area, you're not like constantly harassed by assholes.
Unless you have certain people GMing. So Boot Hill, we would agree that Boot Hill is up there on the
Oh,
list. While
absolutely.
top of our list
Oh
might
yeah.
be different, Boot Hill's up there. What about well, let's go to setting next. What is your favorite game for setting?
No, I gotta say D&D. I'm just a nerd.
D&D is?
I love the
Yeah,
fantasy
yeah,
world. I mean,
but
there's so much in like just taking like something like the Forgotten Realms. That world, there's every setting, and then there's space, and then there's other dimensions and other planes of existence. It's never boring, and if you are bored in D&D, then you have a bad game master. I mean, because there is so much stuff you can explore and do in that game. It is never ending to the amount of cool stuff you can encounter. And I mean, the only thing I would say that is a hurdle on fifth edition is that the players start to get way, way, way too powerful. I mean,
yeah.
they've made the rules kind of so tight for the player that you have to like bring down a shitstorm in order to kill somebody in that game. You really do, especially if you're talking a group of people. I mean, if you've got one guy or two players, maybe you can get around that. But man, if you've got a group of players with high level characters, you're not
Right,
gonna
which
get
which I
See,
do in my current game. I have a large party of 10th level characters that I had to throw some stuff at, right?
yeah.
And they murder everything I throw at them. So one of the things I ended up having to do is I reskinned an iron golem. Iron golems are tough, but they're not that tough, right? For 10th level guys. And so I had basically these demons. They were really iron golems, but they didn't know that. I just, these demons show up, and when they'd kill one, they'd split into two like a pink horror from Warhammer. And that was
Right.
my way of bringing in reinforcements, because if I throw like 5 of them, I think that's how many I started with. There was like 5 of them, and they're like, "Oh, we killed him," and they kept splitting into 2, and they get a little smaller, but I made them just as strong as the other ones. You know what I mean? So they couldn't
Don't allow them to
win, and
heal.
it allowed me to bring in kind of reinforcements without overwhelming them with 100 of these guys show up at once, so they just run away.
The
Right.
way
Whereas
I just worked around it by changing the rules on the healing. You don't get all. You fall asleep. You sleep for 8 hours. You do not get all your hit points back. That is BS. That is
yeah.
ridiculous. That's the dumbest rule they could have created.
That's
But
how
I
it
know
works in
why they
real
did
life,
it.
man.
Yeah,
They,
I sleep
you
6
know, I
hours a
know
day.
why
I
they
feel
did
great
it.
in the
They
morning.
wanted to make the pace of the games go quicker, and
Well,
so
but
the new
see, but
people
that's a
wouldn't be like,
false. See, but on their part, that's a false equivalency because it's not so. We were just talking about Boot Hill. You can't have a more fast-paced game than that, and it is deadly, and that's part of the reason it is
They
so
don't want waiting.
fast-paced. You know?
And it becomes so
That's-
much harder to hit when you're wounded. You get minuses to hit.
Yeah.
So I remember like Kelly in a shootout with this
Right.
guy that's Sean's brother, and they're they bust out their pistols and they're shooting at each other and they're both kind of wounded, and then they get their rifle off their horse and they're shooting at each other and they can't hit nothing, and he's pulling out little boot derringers, and it was like these two guys in the street just throwing lead at each other, and they're both like laying there wounded, but they couldn't hit anything
in that game. That is one thing that's super cool when you get hurt on that. It becomes really a big challenge, man, to try to hit something. It's a lot of fun.
And but see, that's why I wonder if I don't know D&D. It seems like it's. I don't want to come down on it too hard that way, but it does seem like it's more of a marketing-driven design
Well, I think it's less of that. I think it's more that the map has been filled in. D&D's been around so long, right? You can explore the Forgotten Realms, you can explore Eberron, you can explore Kryn, you can explore the one that I'm missing, Greyhawk, and then what is it? The Spelljammer. Like I say, wherever you want to go, there's books about that place. And so the map has been very filled in as far as like what's going on, what's this group do, what's this like, and which is great for a DM, and it's also really good for players who've kind of read that stuff. Everyone's on the same sheet of paper. I've played in games where you can tell that the DM has created this homebrew world and he's put all this thought and effort and passion into it, but none of us players know
meaning like Shadow.
What he knows. You know what I'm saying? And so we're just like, it's like D&D, but it has guns and flying pirate ships, or so, as an example.
Well,
and we're like, what's this based on? It's like, it's a homebrew. And we're like, okay. It's harder to find your footing as opposed to something that you understand, like D&D and Boot Hill. We've all seen Westerns. We all understand what the Wild West was like, at least in a fictionalized role-playing game setting version. There's no leap of faith to get there. You know what I mean?
Well, that's true. But what I meant was not so much that part. You're right. A lot of it's been filled in that way. That's true. Very accessible because, if you're getting into it, you may not know about it, but pretty much you've heard something, so that part. But what I mean is that it seems more like it's become, like you said, Drew, harder to die, or you were saying, Mark, it's harder to die.
Nope.
And I think there may be a group. I could see a meeting over there of them saying, well, how are we going to improve this? We got to make it easier for everybody to become this, And so, well, how do we do that? Well, we take away the ability for them to die so that, they can always just heal up overnight and then continue on their trek to become, the god of their own plane, like that dude who, like I said, made up Shadow that time.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So it comes across more like that. And believe me, you guys have played with, in games I've been in and stuff like, I'm all about you becoming, some major force in the setting and all that stuff. But it's through cost. It's through, going through and actually achieving something, instead of knowing that.
There'd be a challenge there.
Right. Otherwise, it's just on cruise control, and what do you care?
Yeah.
But when you look back at like the Star Wars game, you remember that you guys took that ship and the captain of the ship who wouldn't give up, and he was putting up a fight like you wouldn't believe, and you guys didn't kill him because you admired him so much. You were like, you know what? I'm going to see if he
doesn't sound like us.
I'm going to have him join us. And you did,
Well, that's right. I remember that.
Remember? Yeah. And, became one of your favorite characters because he gave you such a hard time.
He was a recurring NPC.
Yeah. Things like that happen where it's not because it went according to plan, but because it didn't. You fought through it. You found a way around it, that kind of thing. That kind of stuff, the chance and unknowable danger of whatever you're doing becomes part of the payoff, I think. And if you take that away, what's the point?
That's true. Like I say, D&D doesn't feel dangerous. It just doesn't anymore. Boot Hill,
it's mostly
dangerous.
The healing.
Right? Now Savage Worlds, you have 3 wounds. You have 3 hit points. right? And so with Savage Worlds, it's up, down, or out. So for all the little like goblins and stuff, is basically you're just they don't even have 3 hit points. Like if you wound them, they're out of the game. So it's a little harder to have like these bigger boss fights and stuff, but so it can be deadly. You know what I mean? There's things like you have to make certain rolls, so it's a little bit like kind of the luck rolls at Boot Hill, but not quite. So I think Savage Worlds can be deadly because you don't have 500 hit points, you have 3.
Mhm.
3 wounds, and then you're out. And then when you have a shaken, and then you have 3 wounds. So shaken, it's like, oh no, I took some damage, and now I can't hit as well, and whatnot. And then you literally have 3 wounds before your character is like either out or permanently damaged.
So what setting did you say you liked, Mark? Because I know Drew said D&D.
We didn't talk about settings. Man, I'm not sure. There's a lot of great settings. I'm gonna have to go with Rifts.
Okay.
Maybe for nostalgia, because it was one of these wacky 1990s. Let's cram everything we can into one settings. Plus, they had that Ninja Turtles expansion, where you could play Ninja Turtles and everything. True. So, like, I don't know if it's the best setting in the world, like the best ever that I love so much. But man, did we have a ton of fun.
We did, and playing in that sandbox. Now that you bring that up, man, that's a tough choice because I did love that, and TMNT was the whole reason we started playing their stuff, was because of that. And we did have a hell of a good time. It was rules heavy. It was book heavy.
It was. And it was, and it was not elegant and streamlined, but man, we had a good time.
And whatever we wanted to do, we could do. Anything. Superhero, all that. So that's true. Man, that's tough. Because the one I was going to tell you for mine. Okay, so Drew, you got D&D. Mark, you got Rifts. Or let's say Rifts, because that covers pretty much.
That's everything. An actual setting, because Savage Worlds is not a setting; it's a rule set.
Yeah. Right. So D&D, then Rifts, and I'll tell you the one I was gonna say. And man, you made a good case for Rifts, so I don't know if I would still say it, but man, it's tough. The one I was gonna say, Paranoia.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I knew you were gonna say that. That was right up there with me.
The problem
but I've done more with Rifts. Paranoia is a very
Paranoia is a one shot.
You know what I mean?
Paranoia,
you don't play a Paranoia campaign, but oh my gosh, is that hilarious? I love Paranoia.
Now I would say that let's see if we could agree on that. The one setting, the one game that is the most fun, or let's say funny. That's a better way to put it, I suppose. For me, that would definitely be Paranoia. If I want something where I can go in and just at the end of the night feel like I've just laughed myself silly to where I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. Paranoia.
And here's the thing. I don't know the rules to Paranoia. I've never known the rules to Paranoia. You are not supposed to know the rules to Paranoia. I couldn't tell you what the rules to Paranoia are. I don't think they matter. And for those of you who maybe are not familiar with this game, you literally start with 6 clones. So you're intended to just die often, and they just bring in another clone, and away you go. So it's, you're all living in this underground, alpha complex, because of there's been a nuclear war or something, and the computer's in charge of everything. And, you're a troubleshooter who's on the lookout for mutants and traitors, and every character in the game is a mutant and a traitor. And hilarity ensues. And it's got security level clearances by color, and so nobody knows anything because everything is like security at a different level, and it's very tongue in cheek.
You're
not supposed to belong to secret societies, but everybody belongs.
Everybody does,
Yep, secret society, your government organization or whatever that you're a part of, power, and all that stuff. Then the mutant thing and all of that, the Sierra Club, and
you're like issued equipment, like something out of like a James Bond on steroids. They issue this equipment that no one knows how to use, no one knows what it does, and it's all very deadly stuff.
And it's being run. It's being run by like an actual Skynet. That would have been, it's like if Skynet were real and programmed by James Cameron. This is probably how it would have turned out in reality. And so no matter what you do, you are a traitor. It doesn't matter. You can try to, and people have tried, to be the best, most straightforward, honest, hardworking clone they can, which means you're a traitor and need to be put down.
Yeah.
That game to me was the most fun to do, but it is definitely a one shot.
It's a last man standing kind of thing. I mean, I think.
Well, it is, but
See,
it
that one is
wasn't even
more
about
about
one of the
let's have a
funniest
good
things.
time playing, not I want to win.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. You
Right.
just want to see how all this stuff is going to play out because the way they had it set, I'll never forget um, Drew yelling into the screen, "We're all gonna die," because he was trying to get some, of course, they were sent on a mission that was never gonna work, and so they're getting ready to die, and Russ yelling out, to whoever the operator was on the other side, "We're all gonna die," and Mark had as part of his secret society mission was at some point someone's going to say we're all going to die, you need to go up and try to sell them this, right? And so Mark goes up to Russ and tries to sell Russell this thing that he was supposed to sell for his secret society when Russ said we're all going to die. And Russ had nothing to do with that. He was not his contact. No, it's just how the game goes. And then I remember Russell getting wounded to the point where he needed, like everyone needs medical attention, but he didn't die outright. And they send a medical bot to go save him, a Dakobot. And the Dakobot shows up and promptly rolls off the edge of the building where it had been blown up because Russell was, half dead and all that. And so the help that was sent, of course, was destroyed because that's paranoia. And it just, the whole setting to me is just so ridiculously fun. That's why that's why it rivals the nostalgia for Rifts. But yeah, I don't know which one I would choose that way. It's that one was just so much fun. And by the end of the night, you're dead. And the R&D equipment they give you. I remember the one where the one I gave you was the mission where you were given the TAC nuke as part of the R&D equipment, and they wanted to test the new field launching system for their TAC nuke, and it was a nuclear warhead and a rubber band and a wheelbarrow. I remember, and you were supposed to test it out. That's the point. You take this stuff out, you got to test it, right? Things like that were just so much fun, and you knew you were meant to die. And so you went into it with that idea. You weren't upset. You wanted to go out, kind of like in Fury Road. You wanted to go out the best you possibly could. Witness me kind of crap. So that's why that one rivals Rifts
and again,
for me.
I think that's for us. I'm not sure every other role playing
I don't know
group gets it, or is it? You know what I'm saying? Like we have some very funny people in our group. And when you have buy-in from a bunch of people who are willing to jump in and kind of, turn it up to 11 and play along, awesome.
Yeah.
I could see maybe Paranoia not working out with some people who don't know what they're doing or care too much about their character or whatever. But again, that's not my problem. We had a blast. I'd play that again right now.
That's a great point, Mark, because I think that's why Drew fit in so well, was because Drew, immediately, it is on board with that stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the other guys we used to play D&D with, Drew, I don't think they were on the same page. But with Drew, I had a great time, man. I remember Drew and I in one of our D&D games, I think it was one Russell was running. Remember you and I we were a member of the same gang, and it was, we decided our symbol was going to be the Big Trouble in
Little China.
Little China thing. Yeah.
All came, we're like doing the
symbol. Yeah. It was, things like that were just awesome. So right off the bat, Drew, I was able to connect with him, man. Other people, you make a good point, Mark. There's probably a lot of people that wouldn't do it for them because they don't get it, or they don't play the game too.
Right, and again, one of the reasons we play role playing games, or most of these games, is this escapism. Right, you could be a powerful wizard or this amazing fighter or this driving a big robot mech. Right, you get to do this cool stuff in the game that you don't get to do in real life. Oh, I'm a Sith Lord. I'm a Jedi Knight. I'm a whatever. Right. And so it's kind of this wish fulfillment hero, thing. Paranoia is not that. You know what I mean? So if your mindset is I'm doing this escapism because I want to play a powerful Jedi or a big wizard or a
I'm
fighter
winning.
or a cyborg soldier or whatever, like all that's really cool. Paranoia is not that. Paranoia is you are Private Schmedlab who has no idea what's going on. You're gonna die.
Yep.
And you're
have
never
some fun doing it. You know what I mean?
Never. You are not making it to ultraviolet. That ain't
Exactly.
happening.
You're not gonna,
Yeah.
you have no idea what's going on. You're, but again, with the right mindset, let's go. That's a good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is a different mindset than I want to play D&D and take my 5th level, my 10th level, wizard on an adventure that I'm gonna overcome these foes and get treasure and get experience. Like most people, that's why we role play. We want to go do these cool things and have adventure. It's like sometimes you want to turn that off and we want to shake the etch a sketch and start over with something that is just ridiculous and fun, and that's what Paranoia is.
Yeah.
And there's been some new additions. I haven't played the newest edition. It has cards that you deal out for different things, and maybe I'm unfamiliar with. I've been meaning to pick it up to like check it out.
Well, I know at one point I know there was one edition they did where they said, okay, there's 3 different types of players, those who like to do it for fun, those who like the sort of Kafka-esque sort of setting and, all that stuff. And so they were trying to do this, like, if you like this, do this, if you like this, do that kind of thing. I don't know. It didn't seem maybe as fun, but I don't know what the later editions are like now. But I hope they're fun. I hope
I
they
think
are,
the edition
because
that we've been speaking about this whole time has been like the first edition. I don't know all the editions, but they were
the cartoony looking character on the cover and the big eye from the computer.
Yeah.
That's that was the one that I liked a lot. So all right, so Drew, you like D&D. Mark,
okay.
put
So
up
I
Rifts,
just went over
and
to
I would
Drive
say
Through
that.
RPG. If you're not familiar with it, you can get PDFs of all kinds of role playing game stuff, and they do have the original Paranoia stuff available in PDF. The current publisher looks like it's Mongoose Publishing.
Oh, okay, Mongoose is doing that.
Mongoose is doing that. So again, like I say, that might be worth going to check out if somebody's listening to this and they haven't played Paranoia or whatever. I'm not trying to talk anybody out of what's currently on the shelf at your local game store. That's not what we played. I'd be willing to give that a shot, and if it's in the same vein, I'm sure it's great. But what we played was this kind of older edition because we're old. So,
and also, if you're the type of person like that is getting frustrated with 5th edition D&D, there are a lot of new versions, like old school games old school rules that are really good, and definitely one I would definitely recommend would be picking up the Dungeon Crawl
Classics.
I mean, it is just like a load of fun. Oops, and you are like constantly
more backer.
You're constantly this is like the special cover,
the
version.
Mega hardback edition,
and it is like a lot of stuff. It's very old school D&D, and you die horribly.
Yeah, it's very first. I haven't played it, but I've heard about it. Very first edition.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. The art is definitely a throwback. Everything about it is a throwback. And I mean, really, this is very much like the Boot Hill mindset. Like you come up with your character, and you kind of hope he survives, or her, or whatever. You hope they survive, but probably 7 out of 10 times you're not going to.
Right.
I mean, I've had missions where one of the missions I was on in which I actually survived. We had to like investigate this evil wizard on top of this floating castle tower, and defeated him. And I was like, yes! And then of course the castle started to fall out of the sky. And I had to jump and aim for a tree, and of course I missed and died.
See, and that's the thing. If you look at it, and maybe that's if you go into it with the knowledge, this is kind of the point. You're not going in it to win. It's not like the other. You're going in for a good time, and whatever that brings you, that brings you. And if you go into it with that mindset, I think there's a freeing element to that, where you're able to then do things in a given situation that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of, because you're thinking, I don't want my 10th level guy to die. I want him, I'm so close
but
to
I want him to die well. You know what I mean? Like sometimes
Yeah.
dying well is more memorable than 20th level, and there's nothing really else to fight because I'm so powerful. You guys want to play a different game now?
And there's luck in that game as well. And I had probably the oldest character that to live was a halfling that had a very high luck score. And I mean, there were multiple adventures. Like, I mean, definitely 2 adventures in which everyone died, and I hid and got away. And then I lived to tell the tale to new adventures, and I would tell them. I was like, of course, I'm going to tell them the story of. And I was like the oldest surviving character for so long.
Gather around, children.
This hobbit, this halfling, and a matter of fact, one time it was just me and one other player, and the whole idea was to fight through all this stuff to get to this island in a cavern to stop this ritual. And we're in a rowboat. It might have been 3 of us, and we're in a rowboat. We're rowing towards this ritual, and it's like nothing but a bunch of beastmen and like an evil wizard, and they're getting ready to make the sacrifice. And I'm like, what are we doing? It's like we're going to die. It's like, let's get out of here.
This is a terrible idea.
We're not even going to get on the island. And the other guys were like, yeah, let's do. The other players agreed. We left. And it was kind of funny because it's like that is a decision in the game that a lot of players don't ever decide to take.
Don't ever consider, right? They're like, we have to go do the thing that the DM said. No, we don't.
But I mean, if you think
we don't.
as a person, and I mean, the game master was okay with it. He agreed. He thought that was the smart decision. But I mean, it's like some players would just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go up there. And it's like, why?
Well, that's why you need a good, you have to have both parties who are actually versed enough to be able to do that. The players is one thing, because you're right. You will have other players that will want to do something different, the traditional thing, like you were saying, but you also have to have a DM or a GM who's willing and able to go along with that too, and that's a tough thing to find sometimes. I think we've all gone through it, where the GM can look at it like a competition with the players,
Yeah.
Right.
And
or you're
I
stuck
can't
on
let them
rails.
get
You
off
have
the
to
rails.
do this, and then you go here, and then you go there, and that's the only thing I've prepared. And you want to go
Right.
somewhere else. I'm not prepared. You know,
I
what
like
mean?
I
They're
definitely
flustered.
as a game master, I love rooting for the players. I do want them to succeed. And honestly, I've been talking a lot about, dying. I mean, I really don't want my players to die. I want to challenge them, and I want to get them to the point where they're like, we're
Yeah,
gonna die.
and looking back, I don't think I've
That's
had a
just
ton
the
of
point.
characters die. I don't want to make it sound like that's just the way we do. Like it.
That's
I
no
mean,
fun.
outside of paranoia, of course.
We don't want that to happen. But I mean, it's like, you get them, you challenge them. I mean, you put them in a precarious situation. You make it like as dangerous as you possibly can. You make it a challenge, and then, like all I can think of is a situation that my wife playing her character was like they discovered this wizard that was hiding among these guys. They couldn't tell where the spells were coming from. They finally find him. She's like, well, I'm going to dimension door over there with this other player, and they're going to like attack after I dimension door over there behind this wizard. And I'm like, okay. And so of course they do that, and then the wizard's like, ha ha, and knocks the guy unconscious. So it's just her against the wizard. And she's got I think she had 7 hit points. But she has no idea how weak the wizard is at this point. He has been taking hits and stuff, but I said he looked injured. But I mean, she's like, what am I going to do? She goes, I can try to run down. I said, you don't know where that hall goes, because she was facing a tunnel. I'm like, you don't know where that tunnel goes. It could be a dead end. It could be more guys down there. So she's like, I'm like, you have a decision to make. Your options are to run away, down the tunnel, or you could attack the guy. And she goes, but I'm going to have to hit him. I mean, what are the chances of me killing him with one hit? I'm like, well, you could roll a 20. And she's like, oh. She goes, all right, fine, I'm going to attack him. And I'm like, okay. And so she rolled a 20.
See, those are the best, man. Those are the best.
Spectacular.
See, those are the things that when they happen, they create stories that you remember for forever. I remember
rooting for him. I was like, yes, this is great.
Yeah, when it comes in clutch,
or when it goes the other way and it's a spectacular failure.
Mm-hmm.
Remember remember giving Kelly the who gave Kelly the grenade to and told him, was that you, Mark? Told him to go give the grenade to one of the slaves so they could, start a
Oh yeah,
revolt
yeah. Oh,
against the
that's right. We
Dark
were trying to
Eldar.
like give
that
them
was
the stuff
us.
they needed to break
That was
free
us
and
before you
cause a
say.
distraction for
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was it. That was it. And as the slaves were coming off the ship, there's this one lone grenade that goes flying out and does nothing and gets everybody wiped out. And though, so the spectacular is really cool, but man, the spectacular failure can be just as cool too. And seeing how that plays out. And as a player and a GM, not only being willing to explore that, but excited to see the outcome and then roll with it. That's
and
something I
and
will
that could
give
be a
to you
downside of fifth
guys.
edition as well. There are so many mechanics in there that give you a free reroller, give you advantage, that you don't end up with that
Yeah.
negative result that the DM has to worry and the player has to deal with. It's like, oh, there's a bard in the party, I'm going to give you a plus D4, or I'm going to
See,
cast
that
a
just
spell that gives me a
sounds
reroll. Sometimes it's
that's
great when you need it to come in clutch. Like it's good overall, but I can also see like, hey, sometimes you have to roll this die. There's no modification to it. You don't get an extra one. You don't get another try. It's got to come down to what
it
you roll
just
here. That doesn't seem to happen as often in the current version of D&D.
it sounds to me. I haven't played it, but it sounds to me very sitcom-y. Like where you start the sitcom, a situation happens, but at the end it's going to end up being
See, that's what I
right
was I
back
was
to where
thinking
it
about
was.
earlier, to put these different types of approaches to role playing games. One is you're watching a series, and the other is you're watching a movie. Right? Paranoia is a movie. It's meant to be tied up in the one session, and not every it might end up like Reservoir Dogs, where everybody dies at the end. Spoiler warning, right? Or it may end up with a happy ending, or it may end up with an ending that makes you think about it. And a series could be Game of Thrones, where a lot of people don't make it through to the end, or it could be Three's Company, where we end up exactly where we started at the beginning of the next episode or whatever.
I think
Um,
I said before, Sean. I think it may. All I'm saying with the fifth edition game, it's not impossible to make a game challenging for players, but
Yeah.
it is a lot of work for the game master to do
yeah,
it. When they get up
Mm.
in level and all, you have to really. And like I said, what's helped me is changing the healing rules. Now you're smart players, and my guys are smart enough to know like they're not going to go into combat unless they're at their best. So most cases they try to rest enough days ahead of time. But when
Yeah.
they're in a dungeon, when they have to make camp there, is when it comes into play, and they're like, "Look, we're gonna sleep for 8 hours because I want to get all my spells." If you're human, and of course, if you're an elf, you can just what is it, 4 hours or
yeah,
something,
just meditate for 4 hours.
meditate. And but you know that for 4 hours that you have an opportunity to either get them again, or you let them have the little bit that they get back in that time period, and then you attack again. You just have to pace. It makes it more difficult for the game master to pace more. It's not impossible. I've put my guys in really perilous situations, and they've had fun, and they've come out and been like, "Yay!"
But
But I
don't you
mean,
think
Right.
they
But
need
as a
to?
player, though, fifth edition is great because,
oh
again,
yeah,
one of the great things about being a player is you take this guy from first level and you're like, oh, I want to be a ranger or magic user or whatever, and the different classes that you can give them. And like, it's really, I think, taking the best of all the previous editions and put it into like fifth edition is probably my favorite version of D&D because it captures a lot of the great things about the other editions. And there's so much modularity. You can build whatever character you envision. There's ways to do it, and it's so cool because do I get an ability score increase, or do I get this feat, or do I get this, or do I take this switch to this class because I want to get this ability. Like, it gives players a lot of input in building their character and the progression, and I think as a player that's what we love, instead of like, yes, I'm the next level and I get some more hit points and you're
it's a
done.
good game. I mean, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. It's definitely a good system. I mean,
It
I still think first edition is probably just because of nostalgia is my favorite. But fifth edition has a lot of cool stuff. But I think it is more difficult for the game master to make a challenging game without bringing out a lot of big guns a lot of the time.
See,
And
it
I mean,
sounds
that's
like
a
a
drag. You
It
know,
sounds like a video game on easy mode. And which is fine if you want to do that, but why not put something in there so the GM doesn't have to come up with rules on their own, which is fine if you're able to do that. But why not have something in there saying, here's the game. If you want to do something that's more like this, here's how you tweak it. Here's how you change it. You change the healing rules this way. Boom, there you go. You want to do it on hard mode. You want something that's got a little more consequence. Make it a little easier on you as the GM, so you don't have to sit there and figure, okay, so what am I going to have to do this? I got to change this. I got to do this, and just to make it easier on you, so you can actually come up with the story that you want because you are a more advanced GM than someone who's going in there who doesn't have that. You know, I don't know why they wouldn't have that availability. You get it in video games. You get it
but
there. I'm
and
going to
as I
play it
said,
on easy mode, hard mode, legendary, whatever it is.
as I said before, I think it also depends how many like characters are in the game. I mean, if you're dealing with 3 or 4 and they're high level, I think you can do it. You can make it challenging with not too much trouble. But I mean, if you're dealing,
Five
with
to
8,
seven, yeah.
yeah,
But most of them are going to be in that range.
and they're ninth level, you got 8 characters that are ninth level. You get a wide variety of guys, like Mark was talking about, the variety of fellas you can get in a group that can do really cool
Yeah, they
things.
can counter just about anything that you're throwing at
Yeah,
it. Like I said, it just
it's
means you as a
brutal.
DM need to get a little bit more creative and what
Yep.
have you. And like, I don't want to turn this into a down fest on D&D. I love
No,
D&D.
it
Like I say,
isn't.
I play the heck
It's
out of
great.
it.
Great.
But you're
There's a
right.
lot of good
It's
memories
hard.
come from
It's hard
that.
to get killed
Yeah.
in fifth edition, I think.
But
But as a
DCC,
DM, you can kill
easy to
anybody
get
you
killed.
want. Tiamat shows up. Oh,
All right.
Yeah, but the force, not to steal your name, the force majeure that, comes up to do that.
yeah.
So let me ask you this before we come to an end, because we've been going for a while now.
We may have to do a part 2 because there's a couple games we haven't even
Right.
touched on yet.
There's a few that I did want to get into, like the Space Ghost Star Frontiers.
Yeah, Star Frontiers was
But
one of those
Gamma
ones.
World, crazy
What
mutant
Gamma World, yeah.
what would be, Drew, what would be one of your favorite moments, characters from RPGs? One that brings you a lot of fond memories.
Like one of his characters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it's probably my Weemic, my Weemic cat guy, Wotan, who was, who definitely it's a cross between him, who was in a high fantasy world, who was an ex-slave and didn't like slavery, would always kill slavers and everything, and didn't like thieves stealing from him. Ugh. Had some pretty brutal moments there too. But he was a lot of fun because he got up in a high level, and my buddy also had a character that was interesting, who could looked human but could change into a cat. He was like a
Mm-hmm.
shape changer, and he was a blast. And that was Kai, and so Wotan and Kai were like pretty cool, and they would constantly get away with doing really spectacular things. So yeah, they're definitely always make me smile and make me happy to think about those guys. But I also think about a more realistic D&D game I played, which was like Kane Grimslade, who was this guy that literally in the game started out with 2 swords, and he was a sailor, and that was all he had. And then I got into this realistic game, and from there he was a rogue, obviously, and built himself up to being a pretty high level rogue. Had a huge organization in this very realistic city. Was giving money to poor kids to spy and starting schools and things. He was like loved by all the poor people. He was a false prince. He had gotten papers and killed some dude and took over his house. And oh my
So he
gosh,
essentially ran a cartel.
he ran a cartel, and he was pretty interesting. And one of the other players, who was always giving me a hard time, was a wizard, and he was building this keep. This and I hired, without him knowing, I paid a lot of money to the people building the house, and they put in a secret passage into his house. So at one point we got into odds, and I left a message for him in his bedroom on his bed, and he had all these wards and stuff set up. He could not figure out. He was so ticked. But it was fun, you know. It was like it was a blast, and I mean, we weren't like enemies or anything like that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
more like fun, like something I would do to Mark, you know, to really tick
yeah.
him off. Like, what? How did he get in here? This is like, you know. But it was like a lot of fun. But those two characters kind of stand out in mine. I mean, I guess that's why I like D&D so much. It's you know,
The
get some really
nostalgic
great.
memories from it. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
about for you, Mark?
Man, like I say, so many. I was thinking about this while Drew was talking about it. So, Robbie DM'd a game, and it was D&D 5th edition, but it was kind of like pirates, and there was gunpowder and stuff in it. And so I played a goblin bombardier that he was basically named Thaco. And so he was a goblin that I played him as he had one level in thief, and the rest of it was in magic user, wizard, or whatever. So magic missile was his 6 guns because he never missed, right? Magic missile doesn't miss, and so I would just reskin the different spells, and so he'd have like his rocket launcher would be like fireball or whatever. So I'd only pick spells, and that would he'd tinker and make these guns and bombs and stuff like that. And so, but I'd tie all the spells into like some, he had like a Tesla gun, which was like this, shocking hand spell or something like that. And so he was a lot of fun to play. And then I think I'd have to follow that up with, from nostalgia, it'd have to be Akagi, who's our long-standing Rifts character. So we started out in like the superhero setting, and so he was a teleporter. And then we got, shoved over into the kind of the Rifts universe, and he ended up with some kind of weird magic sword that was like had a demon in it or something like that. And so he had this ridiculous magic sword, and he could teleport. And then we got to play around in the Rifts universe, and so hilarity ensued.
And I can speak to that because that was definitely a Mark character. He was cool. Don't get me wrong. He was. But the reason Mark made him, it's a very Mark thing. It was pragmatic. It was, I can take this guy, teleport somebody up this high, drop them, and they're going to take this much damage and die.
We do that a lot.
That was
I grab this guy and hand-to-hand, teleport up 2 miles, and let him go.
That was it. Yeah. And he drove whoever was GMing nuts with his character. Yes,
And you have
he
to
was definitely iconic.
Problem, figure out how many dice that is.
Oh, he only had to figure it out once.
It's a lot.
That was
it's
it.
a lot
he
of
went
dice.
max, and that was it.
Yeah,
that was it. But yeah, he definitely was. For me, man, there's a couple of them. I guess one of the ones I think that would come up would be, and I wouldn't have picked this, but apparently Mark and Russell found this very funny, was the whole thing about, well, I guess there's nothing left to do but go back to base and kill everybody. That one. And requisitioning the 67 Chevy and a 50-gallon drum of fuel. That was a good one. I guess, that era, I would put it probably in that same era.
And that was, I believe, Ninjas and Super Spies. We were playing
was.
at that point. That was one of your Ninjas and Super Spies characters.
Or when Kelly, because Kelly was GMing that, Drew, you would have liked this, Drew. Russell was playing a nurse, right? His character
what a surprise.
What a surprise, right? Yeah, him and Dan, they love playing the women.
Playing the women.
So they were trans before that was a big deal. And so Russell's character was playing a nurse, and the bad guys come in. It's Ninjas and Super Spies, so it's the bad guys with machine guns come busting in. They look around the room. They see Mark's character and my character, and Russell's. Now Mark's and mine both have guns, and Russell's does not. It's a nurse. So Kelly says, "All right, let's roll randomly to see who they go after."
That sounds
Every single one of them lit Russ up. And Russ was so pissed. He was so angry.
Two of us standing here with
You're
guns. They're like,
telling
get her.
these guys come in here and see this and they target the nurse, and they did like 3,000 points of damage to
That's
him. I
ridiculous.
mean, they turned her into hamburger, man.
Before
That
Men in
was,
Black with shooting the
Yeah,
kid.
yeah,
He's so
yeah.
smart,
It's the only
yeah.
one that looked like a real threat.
That was, yeah, yeah. We had some good times with that stuff. I would say probably those sessions. Yeah, that was really good. But I will give you credit, Drew. Do you remember one of my favorites was from our game where we were doing the hero stuff with Rich playing, and our whole we had the ability to transmute. You had the ability, I think, to transmute anything into something else, but it was only for a limited amount of time, and so we decided we wanted a villain's lair, and so we were going to transmute things into gold and go to all the cash for gold stores up and down the West Coast
I
getting
forgot.
money so that we could buy our own
Yeah. Oh,
island.
no. To set this up, right? We were talking about, DMs and kind of the being what is it, an adversarial relationship between player and DM. And our friend Rich was like, "Oh, I can handle it. I can take anything you
Yeah.
guys throw at me." Like, is basically what he said. Is he
Yeah,
threw
he
down the
did.
gauntlet and dared us. And I don't think it lasted the session.
It didn't.
Oh,
no.
yeah.
Before he threw his
That was-
hands up and
No,
no,
it didn't
was
last.
because
such
like
a
Mikey, he
vague,
wanted my
like, I
character to
can
do
barely
something, and
remember.
he's like, "No, you feel compelled to do it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, we're
Yeah,
gonna do that."
that was
Right.
that.
And so
yeah.
then I went over to where he wanted my character to do, and then the guy said something. I was like, "No, we got to listen to him. He's really compelling." Like, and I would listen to everything this guy said from then on out.
I forgot about transmuting stuff and turning it all into gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gold
That's
and
what killed
make
the session, because he
ridiculous.
did that to Mark, and that kind of, I don't know, that
It was a little
Yeah.
ham-fisted,
it
but it was fun.
And so we decided, all right, well, if we're going to do that, let's just get a layer, and
Our
so
blood
figured
wars.
needed money, just needed to be gold for a couple hours, go to
Yeah.
the
Right.
cash for gold stores all up and down the coast, and get enough cash for
Such a great
buying an
idea.
island.
It's a great idea.
I don't think we had even decided. Like, we were like, "Are we going to be superheroes? Are we going to be bad guys? What are we going to be? I don't know."
Yeah,
Let's just
like
see
I
what-
don't remember either. Yeah.
I
Well,
think we
we know we were
decided.
gonna turn
Well,
out
we know where
being
we were going to
bad.
end up, but we didn't know where we were
But we
starting.
were just going to see where the road took us.
Yeah, well, it took us pretty quick there, and yeah, that one was a lot of fun, man. For that little bit, just because of that was great. And you're right, Mark. It didn't last the whole session.
Oh my
But
gosh!
that wasn't that in the zombie thing. That was good.
Oh
zombie
yeah, like
one-off
some of
game.
my friends were in town, right? And my brother was in town.
Yeah,
he
I
doesn't
remember
live
you
by,
guys.
and everybody came over all at my friend's house, and I'm like, "Hey, everybody, we're gonna play Boot Hill." And I didn't tell anybody. So we sit down, and we weren't gonna play Boot Hill. I used the Savage Worlds rules, and I made everybody's characters of themselves. Kind of turned up to 11. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
And so the session started. We're all sitting around playing a role playing game when a zombie apocalypse kicked off, and so we were playing ourselves at your house.
Yeah.
And what we had was what we had at that house, and we're like, "Oh no, the zombie apocalypse kicked off. What are we gonna do?" And hilarity ensued, and that was a good time because in
That
role
was
playing games,
really
sometimes
fun.
you're like, "Oh, I'm a loner. I don't care about anybody. I don't have family. I don't have children. I don't have wives. You're just, you're this really easy to be a loner or whatever." But in this game, it was like, "Oh no, my wife's here or our kid's here." We're like, "Who are we gonna go try to save?" And
I don't think we did any of that. I don't think
there was
I
some
think-
talk about that because I had
There was
Robbie's
talk
wife
about
call
it,
him
but
up
very
screaming like, "Oh
quickly-
no, there's zombies coming through!" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, Robbie. It doesn't sound like your wife made
Yeah,
it."
no. Very quickly, we decided to just create a fiefdom here in around the house, and we did pretty good at that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was fun. Like my daughter was playing. And,
Oh, we grossed the hell out of her.
yeah. That was a good time. That was a good time.
Yeah,
But
you
again,
can't
a
talk about
one-off.
a lot of that. Yeah, that was a good time. But yeah, those moments, man. But see, that's for me. I do like the funny, more outrageous sessions when I'm playing. I love doing that stuff. I love doing the outrageous stuff. I think
I do.
I don't know, Drew. You prefer what? The serious one, or what do you
Well, no,
prefer?
I don't mind. Like, it depends on who I'm playing with. You know, it's like,
Yeah. Well,
I
what do
mean,
you prefer? I mean,
one of
if
my
you have your
favorite
choice, if you have your
one of
choice of who you're going to play with and what kind of,
I
style
like
you're going to play in.
I like a little of both. I mean, I also like when Russell was playing his when he was doing his D&D game, and we all came up with pretty cool characters,
Mm,
and Robbie decided he was going to be a mute bard.
yes.
It was like and we were
Interpretive
just like,
dance.
we were all like, Robbie, that's so dumb. And he's like, well, I like playing it. It's gonna be fun. You'll see. So when we go and we're in the middle of a city that's being invaded by orcs. We fight all these orcs. Exhausting battle. We actually secure like a quarter of the city, and there's a river running through it and a bridge. And we're like, well, we could probably hold the orcs, at this bridge. So let's just gather ourselves here. And we're all like, okay. And Russell's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to gather the arrows that I just shot. And what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to prepare my spells for the next round. I'm going to wrap my runes. Robbie, what are you going to do? Well, you say the river is running down? He's like, yeah, yes. And he's like, I'm going to, I'm feeling rather thirsty. I'm going to go over
Yeah, I
and get my
remember.
drink. And everybody was real quiet, and we were all
Yeah.
kind of looking at him. And then Russell's like, well, your thirst is quenched. And then we all went, ha ha, we all like laughed.
And that has been a running joke for years
That
since
has.
about Robbie's
Your thirst
thirst
is
being
quenched.
quenched.
Yes.
This was so stupid.
See, now here's what I'll say. I like playing a serious game where you're trying to, save the world or find adventure or whatever. But there's a lot of Russell once described our role-playing style as stand-up comedy sitting down around a table. Right. And so we can joke about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if instead of doing, this heroic thing, we ran off and did this or that, we don't actually do it, but so like we as the players are joking and making a joke out of whatever the situation happens to be. But then kind of in game terms, we're like down with whatever the story actually is. You know what I'm saying? So it can be very tongue in cheek of just us hanging around the table, having a good time, but we're still playing a real adventure or a straight adventure, if that makes sense. So I think that's probably what I would prefer is when I want to play wacky, I'm going to go to Paranoia, right? But when I want to play adventure, like I love playing D&D, and you're like, we're going to save this town or we're going to fight off these orcs, but then we're going to joke about, Robbie drowning in the river while he's drinking or what was happening upriver before he started drinking, or who knows, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Remember the 40K player that actually, my 40K character, who you said that I was raised on the Death Planet.
Oh, Death World.
Every situation that we were being like confronted with, it's like, do you think you can do it? It's like, well, I was raised on a Death Planet. Been fighting these things all my life. Like,
I didn't get these blood stripes from nothing.
So he was always bragging about how hard his life was. And...
yes.
Yeah. So it's a perfect example. We're playing the 40K role-playing game, and we're trying to do epic things. But of course, us as players, we're just hanging around, cutting up and joking, because isn't that why we get together to play games? It's not to be like we're putting on an epic play and we all have to remain in character the whole time until someone says cut. No.
You have to admit, I did put in a lot of effort getting the props, if you will, for those settings. Like with the Star Wars one, doing that.
He converted and painted characters for painted figures for all of our characters and a lot of the NPCs and the bad guys. And
I don't know if that made any difference, but I did
fun.
enjoy doing that. I still have all your characters and all your Star Wars ones, all your 40K ones, and all that. I still got those.
It was fun. Those are always cool.
That was cool.
I like a mix. It's. I still, even when I game master, I'll have like weird NPCs or things that are just kind of unusual. It's like, I think that's the joy of it. You do different voices. This is your chance to be goofy and kind of fun. And when it's like, when you get time to get down to business, it's time to get down to business.
You got to find that mix.
Drew, I one of the times I had that was a lot of fun too. man, I keep bringing up other stuff. But one of the ones that was a lot of fun, I actually tried to do an imitation kind of you for you brought up the 40K game. Do you remember the Nurgle guy when you guys landed on that planet and the Nurgle guy was all
Like
excited
all
and
friendly
happy
and
with,
happy and
yeah,
excited.
and
Yeah.
started like rubbing his tentacles on you and doing all that stuff and everything, and slobbering all over you and all that. That was me doing my impression of you doing that character. Because I thought to myself, how would Drew play this guy? And I thought, that's how he needs to be done. So just so you know, that was my homage to you. That was Sean's impression of Drew doing an impression of a Nurgle patriarch. Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing that 40K character.
That's right. Take that for the compliment it was.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. My only regret with the 40K game was the rule system.
Yeah, that rule,
Like,
man.
none of us really
Brutal.
knew it.
Brutal.
It didn't click. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had to look up a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said for, like, if you know, like I know D&D. I know a 5th edition rule set pretty well. And I've known the previous ones, but like if it's based on that, like let's go back to 3rd edition, because the Star Wars role-playing game was very 3rd edition-esque,
Yeah.
you know, 3.5-ish or whatever. And so knowing the D20 system really helped a lot of games, because you didn't have to overcome that how do I learn the rules. And the only other way around that is a rules light system, which again, I like Savage Worlds or Boot Hill, is there's not a lot to learn. You know what I'm saying? But then, you know, you come in with some weird, like, oh, it's a 40K game. We got the license, but it's this game system none of us were familiar with, and that we had to learn. Like, it was a bit of an impediment.
You know, if they had something that if your characters want to do something that's not covered in the rules, give it this percentage chance based on how outlandish it is.
That's what 5th edition.
And then give
does.
them that, you know.
Yeah.
And leave it at that, and then you can expand it into anything you want.
Yeah, well, like I say, a good DM overcomes all the problems with the rules. Yeah, you know. So.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I mean, they have a scale of difficulty in 5th edition, so you can set the what you have to roll in die 20 based off of how difficult it is, and they give really clear examples of things that would be more difficult. And then, then I guess you would get whatever skill you have. If you have a skill that could apply to making that a little easier for you, you can go ahead and apply that.
And not telling them no, even if it's like super outlandish, but just making it like really hard to do.
Let them try.
I give Kingston credit. I remember I was playing D&D with you guys. It was one of the first times we were doing it over at his place. And remember, he had the little blocks he would move around on his map and make new areas and all that. And I remember I was playing some low-level cleric, and he said there's some noise of a monster up the tunnel, and it's really scary and big and all that. I said, okay, well, I pray for it to go away. and instead of telling me no, he said, okay, roll. And I'll give you whatever chance. He said 1 out of 100 or something like that. And I rolled it. I rolled, that chance. And he was like, okay, noise goes away. The next time I tried it, which I gave him a lot of credit for, Kingston went up in my evaluation as a GM because of his ability to roll with the punches that way and not tell me no and not complain about it or any of that stuff, but to, go along with it. The next time I tried it, he said, okay, you can do it again, but it's going to be this much harder. So roll this, and it was like two times you had to roll 20s or something, whatever you had, So instead of telling the person no, just here's how you do it. Here's how you, handle that based on the outlandishness of whatever they're doing. And if they had something like that, I think it would just make it so much.
Yeah. Well, like in 5th edition, my players would be like, I want to do this, and I'll lay it out. I'll be like, okay, you're trying to do this acrobatic thing, or you're trying to find this thing. And they always want to use their ability or their skill that is their most advantageous, because there's a difference between like investigate and notice or whatever. Right. And they're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, that's like, you're trying to notice a thing, not investigate is more like, oh, I got, I'm going to go to the library and check out some stuff, or I'm going to go ask around or whatever. I'm like, this this doesn't apply in that, so you have to roll this one, even though it's maybe not as good as the other one. And I'll just explain, like, here's my reasoning. This is going to be hard to do. You have to use this skill or this attribute because is it strength based? Is it dexterity based? Depending on what you're doing. Oh, my dexterity's better. I want it to be a dexterity. I'm like, I know you do, but this is really more strength based. And when I explain my thought process, 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, I get it. And occasionally I'll get but my character, blah, blah, blah. And I've been persuaded a couple of times. Yeah. Shut up. I've been persuaded a couple of times where they were like, oh,
Hey,
no, my character has this or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't
In all
remember
fairness,
that.
we've seen some of those. Yeah.
Yeah. None of your attributes will do you any good here.
Attributes. Remember how Mark says it. Attributes.
Tribute.
Attribute.
I like that. I like that, Mark. I do. After all these years of knowing you, I still get joy. Every now and again, Mark will throw something in there that he says just a little bit differently. It's not wrong. It's just, it's different.
It's not wrong if you've been saying it your whole life.
But I love that I love that, man. I love that about you. I really do. That's one of the things that I find really cool.
Living on a death world. It's really
on a death world, we
have
don't have
become
time
less
for
important.
proper
Let's be clear. It was more of a hardship world. It really wasn't that much of a death world. It was a very inconvenient world.
Well, death to
There were
English and
times when
grammar.
I actually had to walk to school. I mean, it was awful.
Oh,
I had
I'm
to
sure.
walk 2 football fields in length to school.
That's right. So you grew up in Glen Burnie? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, Glen Burnie. Yeah.
Right.
So-
So. But anyway, we
All
are
right.
definitely up against it.
We are.
This one's going to be a long one. So
Yeah. Well,
No
well,
one's going to listen to this.
we can cut it in. We can cut it into 3 parts. There you go.
yeah. Maybe this is one, maybe 3 parts. We'll see.
Yeah.
4 equals square.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for dropping in. And if you've made it this far through it, you're now level 10. So
You're
You get a free
Yeah.
reroll.
and we'll see you in the next one.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.